The cost of food waste amount from between 6 to 14% of the food revenue. It's a massive amount of money. We're talking between 1 to 2 points of the gross operating profits, which is a lot of money. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure. I was a bit doubtful at the beginning that still people would be here at this time. So I took a nap to make sure I would make it up to now. So congratulations to all of you. So yes, my journey with food waste was a bit of a funny one. I am not a chef. I've never been trained in hospitality. It just happened that I was meant to sell home cinemas in Thailand, and this job didn't work. I came to Thailand, looked for a job, forced my way into Accor Hotel Group, and they say, oh yeah, there's this position, hotel sustainability, do you want it? Yeah. So I took it. Fast forward, then I was a consultant for the UN on greening the hotel industry, whatever it means. And I was looking at energy, water, waste, chemical, staff awareness, kind of the whole thing. And then started to realize during the audits that I was seeing bins full of food. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I started to ask questions to those professionals, me not being in that industry. So it was like, how many kilos do you have in that bin? And what is it? And why do you have this? And how much does it cost you? And they would look at me like, why do you care, dude? And I was like, okay, it seems relevant to me because how many bins like this do you have? And so that was the whole process behind, was like, okay, I have no clue about food and the food waste issue. And by starting to ask relevant questions, realizing that there was an entire world out there that was unexplored. So I managed to convince one hotel manager to let me try a methodology that I found online. And at the beginning, I was just by myself, so it was a bit challenging. We started with a huge hotel, and I wanted to answer that question: how many kilos would a hotel that size waste per day? So I started to identify where food was stored, prepared, served, or disposed of, and started kind of mapping the back of house and say, okay, those are the 8 recording points that we need to check if we want to capture and answer that question. But then realizing that being not from the industry, I had no clue about who is doing what. So like, okay, well, good to know who is in charge of the kitchen, purchasing, F&B, etc. What is the communication channels between those guys? And then again, starting asking those kind of stupid questions, and then seeing no answers really pushed me. And I was like, okay, we have an issue here that is quite important. And I thought that from that initial win, because it was the results were very impressive, both financially and in terms of amount of food that we managed to rescue. I thought that it would like just go skyrocket, and actually not at all. We were too early. You were talking about being too early in your discipline. I was way too early on food waste, and I was then presenting the result, going back to other hotel groups, and like, hey guys, this is probably you have a problem, and they would be like, yeah, you're trying to sell a solution to an issue we don't even know we have. And I was like, oh damn, okay, well that's fine, let's be patient. So it was a one-man show, and then started to have one intern, two intern, first full-time employee, etc., and then boom, COVID hit. And then we had to entirely, rethink our way of working, because at the time we were going one by one. We'd take one hotel and then try to map all those areas, monitor all the food waste, capture the information, understanding the gaps, communication, procedures, etc., and then accompany them. And then when the COVID hit, we're like, okay, well, we're stuck. We can't go into the hotels. We had 45 days worth of basically cash flow, and we decided to pivot. We digitalize all of our solutions. We focus on education. We turn our office into a studio, and we actually started to share our knowledge to a much broader audience. So we are currently working, just to give a sense, we have customers in about like 30 countries, mainly hotels, restaurants, universities, culinary schools, and we propose solutions related to capacity building, technology to monitor food waste and capture the right information, as well as consulting and support to certification. But today, I want to talk about a very specific angle of food waste, which is poorly understood. And actually, to me, I will try to share why is this issue still not much more like seriously addressed, in particular in the context of the hospitality industry. Yeah. So we like to use that one to help also get employees to look at things differently, and obviously when we're presenting our services. Quick show of hands. Is there anyone here being an asset manager or owner of a hotel? No. Anyone managing commercial kitchens, let's say, that are from the hospitality sector? Hotel, kitchen, chef? Cool, doesn't matter. The point being that there is still a huge gap in terms of understanding the severity of the food waste issue in the hospitality sector. And it is an absolute necessity because there is a lot of talks about, yeah, sustainability. Oh, yeah, I care so much. Oh, you work on food waste. Oh, my mom always told me to finish my plate. Yeah, okay. Can we talk about the real things, what is happening in your day-to-day business, and how we can help you address this? Until you hit the pain point, which is the money, you don't really get the attention of your audience. And that's a bit like where I'm coming from here. So we identify we collect literally millions of data entry points related to how much, when, where, what, and why is food wasted in commercial kitchens. And obviously, one interesting fact is that if you look at the entire hospitality sector, there are probably 3 to 5% of all players that are actually monitoring food waste. So that means that they don't capture data. They don't capture, so that means that their knowledge is limited to, yeah, we have food waste because of the buffet. Oh yeah, the food waste issue is all related to breakfast. But that's purely, wet finger sort of estimation. Yeah, well, I see it in the breakfast, so I assume that. And actually, it's not the case. Anyway, so what we are looking at here is a shortcut for anyone that you may know that is running, let's say, a hotel, owning a hotel, maybe not running it, is how do you calculate the cost of food waste? So we have this simple methodology, which is you basically take the number of daily covers that you have. You multiply it by 0.3, which is 300 grams, the average quantity of food waste per person eating. Then you multiply it by 5, which is 5 USD, which is an average cost of 1 kilo of food. If you take the mix between your meat, your seafood, your dairy, your veggie, and then 365 is obviously being the number of days. So if you take an example of a hotel with 500 covers, things go very, very nasty very quickly. 150 kilos per day, that's 750 USD per day, and that's 73,000 USD per year. And that's a shortcut. Yes, you can play with it if you want. Singapore, instead of $5, if you take a 5-star hotel, that would mainly be like around 10 to 12 to give you a sense. And that's kind of only the visible part of the iceberg, which is, to me, a good news and a bad news. So visible costs when it comes to food waste for commercial kitchens are, well, the ingredients, what you purchase, and possibly what you pay for to dispose of your waste, right? But then you have all the hidden costs that are manpower, utilities, wear and tears, as well as obviously all the social environmental costs that were presented earlier by my colleagues. So that I don't need to repeat. But based on the calculation I showed you earlier, what is freaky is that you can actually add 20 to 40% on top of that price to actually make up for what is really happening. So to include all those components, and here you would get closer to the real bill. So, spent like 13 years on this, and we're like, but so why is the industry not moving? Why there is so much cash over there in those bins? Why are they not acting? And I'm crying every night, and I'm like, seriously? And then I'm sharing my stories, and they're like, well, my close friends are like, yeah, but you don't present it correctly, or you don't speak to the right people, or the figures are not compelling, or it's too difficult, or like, yeah, okay, all right. And then suddenly, started to have an aha moment that I would like to share with you. So basically, the first one is what I was sharing. The fact that there is a lack of monitoring. If you don't monitor your food waste, you assume you're doing good. And it's a natural bias by chefs, for instance, that would say, well, no, we don't have much. We have just this. And then when you start digging, you're like, what about that bin, and that bin, and that bin, and that bin? Well, okay, we'll see. So what we found out is that when we ask how many kilos you think you're wasting per day, they are actually wrong by a factor of 3 to 5. So meaning that they're usually wasting 3 to 5 times more than what they initially thought. And since they don't have monitoring system, they couldn't figure this out by themselves. Second aspect in the hospitality sector is this focus on the all-day dining. You know, all-day dining where you have the breakfast for your guests. But actually, all-day dining is only about 20% of what is happening. And then food waste is literally happening everywhere else. Of course, depending on the size, the type of hotels, etc. But you see a lot of bias in the terms of data that are available out there, because most of the solutions tend to focus on this false assumption that buffet waste is the main culprit, or breakfast is the main culprit, which is actually not the case. So issue number one is that food waste is actually happening everywhere, and if you don't have a comprehensive approach, you don't capture everything. Second indicator, which I think is even more interesting because it's kind of structural, is that most of it, I not coming from the industry, I started to ask those stupid questions, including, how do you measure your performance? So, food cost percentage. So food cost percentage, purchasing divided by sales, cash in, cash out. If you have a good 30, 35%, it's acceptable, no question asked. But then we started to realize that capturing food waste and then asking them an extra question, which is, how many kilos do you actually buy in volumes, not in dollar, in volume? How do you translate your purchase in USD from USD to kilos? Then you take that initial quantity and you measure how much you waste. And then we're saying that between 25 to 30+% of the volume of food purchase, so raw material, was actually lost in the process. But then we also realized that the industry is notoriously not precise when it comes to covers, measuring the number of people. I had this discussion, is still stuck with me, with the person in charge of food waste for one of the largest hotel group worldwide. We're talking about thousands and thousands of hotels. That would say, yeah, we measure food waste by quantity of food waste divided by square meters. You know, this is completely absurd. And they were like, yeah, but we're notoriously bad to count covers. They're like, well, that's funny how you try to deflect the issue by finding some reason for it. Anyway, what we're asking is, why don't you track your covers and your quantity purchase to be able to look at different type of indicators? So one is, what we're looking at is, well, typically the weighted cost of food per kilo, but then we look also at the quantity purchase per covers, meaning, are you buying 1, 2, or 3 kilos for each person that is eating? And we saw some very interesting discrepancies between urban hotels that have more easily access to supply to those that are more remote on island, for instance, in Maldives, where we've seen like crazy numbers like 3.5, 3.8 kilos per cover sold. When you know that one person eat on average about 400 to 500 grams, I find it pretty interesting. But one of those aha moments, again, was like, okay, maybe we are actually speaking to the wrong people, meaning that most of my career, we've been working with operators, brands, those that are actually running the business on behalf of owners. And we realize that those that are running the hotels, the brands, do not have the same incentives. And we kind of felt it days after days when we were presenting the results, and we're like, but guys, you are actually, on average, wasting for that specific brand approximately 600,000 USD per year. For that brand, it would be $1.2 million per year. Why you're not like, you know, having your eyes popping out and you crying day in, day out, is actually realizing that it's not their money. They don't really need to care for that because the indicators they use are incomplete and the questions from the owners are not going that deep. So business as usual And the reaction we had was more like, well, let's not dig too much because it may reflect badly on us. So that's one of the big issues that we have identified and that we want to shift, is to stop talking to those that are just managing and actually focusing on those that own the business, because they are the one bleeding cash. So how much are we talking about? There are two indicators that I think are interesting, and for those of you that are into finance. The first one is, from our measures, the cost of food waste amount from between 6 to 14% of the food revenue. It's a massive amount of money. If you turn it into KPIs used by asset managers or owners, we're talking between 1 to 2 points of the gross operating profits, which is a lot of money. So this sort of shift for us is important, and it's kind of cry out to those that are actually owning businesses and owning hotels in that case, but kind of remotely, not dealing with the day-to-day sort of things, to get them to challenge the way they are assessing what we call the food efficiency of their operations. So to explain a bit, and not too much because it's boring and it's late, and I want to have questions, and I think it's going to be more interesting. So how do we monitor food waste? So we use our Food Intel tech that is based on generic devices where kitchen teams are trained to monitor food waste, segregate, and basically answer the key question: how much, when, where, what, and why is food wasted? We do apply a certain type of methodology to help us being more specific. And I will take one example with plenty of numbers. So we will take the baseline. At the beginning, hotels, they don't know how much they waste. So we take usually the first 7 days of operation, ensure that it is complete. Then we'll go step by step. We use 4 different categories. We have spoilage waste, which is anything related to mismanagement of your food while being stored, anything expired or contaminated. We have preparation waste, then we have buffet waste, and then we have plate waste. And each of them is measured and categorized so that we can understand why is food wasted within those commercial kitchens. And here I'm just taking an example of a detailed methodology. I don't want to bother you too long with that, but where we do actually apply certain hypotheses. So for instance, if we want to be closer to the actual costs, we would remove 50% of the preparation food waste, assuming that half of it is unedible, unavoidable, offcuts, etc., stuff that you can't really do much with. We will count all the buffet waste, and then the plate waste will reduce by 20% in volume to be, again, like as close as possible from the exact numbers. And then you do the total calculation. Here we took a very low estimation that would usually be $3 per kilo, typically for a canteen. And then you have the cost over the period. Then you add the 15% labor and utility. Singapore would be plus 300%. And then you come up with, okay, what is the cost per day, per week, per year? And that's actually how we are fine-tuning our methodologies in order to put a price tag on it. It's a lot of number, I told you. Anyhow, I think that there is a need now for, in particular, asset managers or hotel owners, in that case, to ask the right question in order for the industry to start shifting. And this is, well, we're currently writing a white paper with a professor from a university in Paris about what are the right questions if you're a hotel owner that you should ask your team. So first, using some shortcuts to give you an idea of the severity of that food waste situation for your portfolio, using the covers approach. Then prioritizing, because you may be an asset owner that do not have any breakfast or very little, in which case you rule that out. Focus on your big F&B revenue generating assets. Then it's about asking the right question. Some of the indicators I was presenting, are you measuring food waste? How much do you pay on waste disposable fees? Do you actually translate your food waste into money lost? What sort of indicators are you using? Do you measure the quantity you purchase, et cetera, et cetera? Then it's about demanding transparency and results. And then it's about incentivizing. Because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying here that chefs are slackers and that people working in industry, I know they are working their ass off. So it's really not about that. What we're trying to do is to get the top management or the owners to agree to share some of those savings with those that are actually doing it and making it happen on a day-to-day basis. And that's, I think, is a very important point. And this ugly photo, that ham, is actually my calf. And my initial intention was not like to show how hairy I am. It was more like to say that, well, I believe that there are a great deal of issues, global issues, that technically could be solved by the 0.1% of the wealthiest. Here, I'm just trying to get those guys to endorse a minimum of responsibilities, kind of move their ass, and start asking the right questions so that industry can stop being so wasteful and running on old principles, like doing the same thing over the last 50 years, and start asking the right questions so that we can move towards a more responsible industry, more efficient, and less impactful. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. We're going to dig further. For those of you that are interested, we're going to publish this white paper sometime soon.